I am super excited to welcome you guys here again to our monthly gathering and why it is that we do this on the first of every month, which is a chance to kind of reinvigorate and re-energize for the work of the month ahead as we are in this crazy moment in time that is filled with tremendous possibility and lots of headlines that go the other direction. So it's our goal to sway the story to a more empowering and more positive one, even though we're obviously realist about the work that is ahead of all of us right now. And we theme them for each month. And so it is exciting that we're going to start seeing a whole bunch of climate stuff starting as of today and continuing at least for the next 30 days. Hopefully, as we said, it should be Earth Day every day. But our attention, right, gets heightened in this moment. And so, again, to help us prepare for how to navigate that conversation as we head into it. So, and joining me is Ila Colombo from Dubai, which I'm so, again, thrilled that you're here, but somehow I've lost you in my screen, Ila. I gotta figure out how to pin you. But how are
Maybe
you?
if I speak, I come back up in your list. Yeah, I'm just gathering all my thoughts and waking up slowly and enjoying all of the screens.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of people have written about this and tried to inspire us for a zillion years, and yet here we are in this moment in time. And the question is, are we feeling more optimistic or pessimistic? So it'd be actually interesting, even in the chat, if you guys are even on screen, like, are we feeling, just checking in with you guys as you look at all the news in both directions. Are you feeling, as we step into Earth Month 2024, more encouraged or more discouraged? Feel free to jump in.
I'm encouraged about our all the material science and AI stuff. That's just off the charts. I mean, tens of thousands of potential new materials, but our response is modest.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I would look at that in a lot of different ways in terms of, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Any technology, right? There's this whole balance between the technological advances, and the question is what it is that we're doing with them and which problems are we creating that we're not realizing that we're creating. There's a whole another conversation to have around that. Oops, I have somehow pinned everybody. So I've got you full screen already, and I'm just trying to figure where everybody else is. Anybody else? What are you guys thinking?
I feel hopelessly hopeful. There's so much to be done. I'm ever the optimist, but I also don't want to feel hopeless amongst it. So
yeah, I will just say, in preparing for this, right, I was like looking for all the scary stats so we could remember again why it is that we need to pay attention to all this, even though folks on this call really don't need it. And again, we're going to get flooded with that over the next certainly week or two as we head closer and closer to Earth Day. But I will say there's a ton of encouraging news. That's really what we wanted to focus on as we gathered in today. So Mita, I think we can stop the carry. There we go. Hi, everybody. Again, hopefully more people will join us as we go through, but I will also, I'm aware of the fact that there's a college basketball game on right now with one of the top players in the entire country and world, Caitlin, who is playing at this moment. So in girl power, we were cheering on Caitlin as we also then cheer on the environment. So why don't we just sort of set the stage, Mita? Jump in with the first video.
Hello, my name is Olivia Colwine, and on behalf of the fossil fuel industries, I would like to say a huge thank you for all your support this bumper year. People like you have pumped billions of your hard-earned pounds into our gas and oil businesses. The cash from your pensions has helped us dig, drill and destroy more of the planet than ever before. We've even managed to build a few little wind turbines to keep Greta and her chums happy. Cute. You see, every little drop from your precious nest egg adds up. So while the global temperature may go up a teensy-weensy degree or two, our profits are literally soaring. And that's all thanks to you. So to guarantee us all a warmer, snugglier future, please keep sending your pensions our way. You know the drill. Oh, fracking hell. Okay, start again.
Yes.
I mean, it's funny, right? And yet it's also not funny. But the point obviously is that she's making that we talk a lot about the micro actions that each of us are doing, but we often don't think about the investments that we're making and how they're aligned or not aligned with this. And I will confess that I haven't gone through the fine tooth comb with all the things that, my brother manages for me, who's probably a little less sensitive to some of the things that I'm very sensitive to, and can do a better job of doing that. So I don't know where you guys are on your own commitment. Like, has anybody changed the way that they think about this from not just a day-to-day perspective, but from an investment perspective? No. So there's a big opportunity there. And I love the way that they use humor to get us there. So it's not just beating us over the head. I did, as I was looking at all these statistics, see one, I think it was from from Australia, that said, the whatever, 20 scary climate statistics that you won't read, because now we're starting to duck out of the news. Right, we're starting to turn away from the headlines. We're starting to turn away from the statistics. We're as a society sort of putting our blinders on, because it does feel so overwhelming, and it starts to feel like we don't know our way out. There's actually an extraordinary woman I had a chance to meet via Zoom like this in a regenerative futures workshop called Margaret Klein Solomon, who is a psychologist who had her own climate absolute scare, big, huge kind of epiphany about where she believed that we were headed. And she has turned a lot of her work now to helping people deal with the dark sides of this, right? The rage and the fear and the overwhelm, and really wanting people to feel as though they have a space and a safe space to be able to process those emotions, to be able to then move it into climate action. So she also then became the executive director of the Climate Emergency Fund. And as Time Magazine described her as the woman behind the people who throw all the paint at the paintings, right? Or food at the paintings. Like, she is the funding a lot of extreme climate action and movement to try and wake people up and to have some attention around this. So if you hear more about her, she's really, really a lovely, lovely person. It was interesting because on the call that she was a part of, at some point she got cut short by the host because he found it so uncomfortable to hear her sort of how she's making peace with sort of a doomsday scenario in her own world and trying to help other people in it. And so there's, room, I think, for all portions of this conversation, those who are, feeling the rage and feeling the fear, and those who are feeling the optimism and are feeling a sense of agency and wanting to drive forward. And I will say, again, as I was preparing for this and looking through some of the news, there's lots we can be actually much more, I think, encouraged by, and to me feel as though we're moving in some direction. And part of that is I got to meet Ila when I was in Dubai. I was there for the Dubai Futures Forum, and then I stayed for a few extra days to catch the very beginning of COP28. I wasn't really there for much of the really big programming. I was sort of there prior, and we had a chance to walk through some of those spaces together. Ila, what were your impressions about it? So tell us a little bit. I mean, we will do a longer dive into you and your work, but you recently moved to Dubai, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for inviting me to be part of this event. It goes without saying that this is a huge subject for us, and I'm sure for a lot of the participants here tonight or today. And it is overwhelming. It's undeniable that it can either be giving you a lot of urgency and inspire a lot of action, but it can also create a lot of neural passivity just because you want it to go away, right? We're dealing so much on a daily basis that for the average person, I think it's really, really hard to even dedicate a little portion of their existence to thinking about the problem. And so what we do as creatives is try to bridging this gap between impossibility, possibility, knowing, not knowing, and help people kind of cope with that. And I think obviously there's a lot of climate action that can be very impactful in a very quick way and quite shocking. Like in the UK before moving here, there was Extinction Rebellion that had a few strong
and this Margaret actually she funds that, but the woman there.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
and that's very disruptive, and obviously you need the kind of quick and fast and very powerful disruption. But I think overall, it's more the kind of gentle educational communication and decontextualization of the entire society that needs to happen at a slow pace and every day. And that's where art can play a role. That's where architecture can play a role. Is all this kind of like repopulating the entire built environment that surrounds us, because you need it on a daily basis to be kind of there refreshing you, right? It's like having the entire house full of quotes that just gives you motivation, for example, or having a life coach with you all the time. It's the same way for nature conservation, sustainability. We need to be reminded, but we need to be inspired at the same time, right? And if it's too scary, it doesn't inspire us. If it's very optimistic, well, it's too good, then it doesn't need our help. So it's just sitting in that in between, right? That is just about enough to make us wanting to be participating in the bigger picture. So yeah, I think I'm optimistic, although I'm someone before said, is this better? Is this hopelessness, hope? You need both. So yeah, and of course it's such a complex, intricate subject that you need to look at the entirety of the ecosystem altogether. It's a very holistic subject.
And that I think is part that it adds to the overwhelm, right? Because you start to point to this piece and then it's connected to this piece. And then if I can't impact that piece, or if these
correct
in concert, although again, I'm starting to see more and more systemic interventions that you can imagine would have, are related to other things that could start to create a positive domino, not just a negative domino as we move ahead. And it's interesting, again, as we'll talk about your work in more detail in a moment, about the fact that you've chose to be in Dubai to do this work, because I think that's part of the question. For me, Go ahead.
It's kind of paradoxical, obviously, and there's a lot of controversy around Dubai, but what we found overall, this is a perfect grounding place to test a lot of those things. Not only they have the capital to invest in some of the things that other nations may not have, they're relatively small scale. It's a country that is it manages its own scale quite well, and whatever comes in terms of climate change overall across the globe, here they're going to experience it first. So a little bit like going on Mars and trying to cope with the adversity of that kind of Martian situation. The same here, right? So temperatures are already through the roof. So they need to start to understand those kind of scenarios way earlier. So whatever they pilot here or manage to solve here, I think there can be great innovations throughout that can be applied elsewhere as well. So Dubai already has the biggest solar farm in the world. They've been recently opened. They have the biggest vertical farming in the world. They're trying to have a completely recycled water loop within their grid by 2030, I think, or even earlier than that, because of course they have to desalinate their waters. But they want to create a completely closed circular cycle for that, so they don't waste any of that. So all of those kind of things that they need to really tackle now, I think the faster they do it here and they prove it right, the faster it can be deployed elsewhere as well. So there's a lot of ups and downs, but hopefully a lot of innovation being pushed here.
Oh, wow. I guess I knew some of that, but I didn't really think about the fact that they were sort of at the front end of this crisis, which is what gives them then extra motivation to be innovative around it and not just keep doing it the same way. So on the one hand, we can look to the future and all the things that we're going to, innovative that are going to come our way. And we'll dive more into that. But I think it's also been really refreshing and encouraging and respectful to go back and look at Indigenous voices and wisdom and understand, not only were they victims of all this, but they are gateways to being able to understand this better and including those voices into the solutions. And so we'll show first the work from a woman named Sônia, whose name, I can't pronounce anybody's last name. But she has, her own extraordinary background and became Time Magazine. She was on Time Magazine's list of world's most influential people and became the first minister for Indigenous people in Brazil. So there were some friends who had done a documentary about her work, and here's just a little tiny excerpt so we can introduce you to Sônia and what she's up to.
Eu sou a Sônia Guajagara, do povo indígena Guajajara, do território indígena Araribóia, no estado do Maranhão. É um momento de um autoritarismo violento que a gente está vivendo. Uma ameaça muito grande, para nós, povos indígenas, porque essa política hoje adotado no mundo inteiro, né, de desenvolvimentista. Hoje as pessoas estão muito distantes da terra, né, estão muito distantes da natureza e estão acabando com tudo. O racismo que vem sendo expressado no Brasil é o reflexo também desse momento que a gente está vivendo. Né? Só que chega um momento que a violência, né, a morte dos parentes, né, essa ameaça de acabar com nossos territórios faz esse despertar. Né? Estamos fortalecendo nossas bases, fortalecendo a nossa luta com outros povos, com outros territórios que também enfrentam os mesmos problemas, que também enfrentam desmatamento ilegal, que enfrentam mineração ilegal. E as mulheres vêm para frente também, para a linha de frente, dizendo, não, a gente está junto, a gente está preparada, a gente também quer lutar e a gente não vai ficar assistindo tudo isso. Nós conseguimos trazer a pauta indígena para o centro do debate político, que a pauta indígena ela não se dissocia, não se separa da pauta ambiental, assim como está ligada também com a pauta de direitos humanos, né? E nós mulheres temos todo esse cuidado, esse reparo, né? Essa sensibilidade para estar fazendo essa luta articulada, né? Conectando todos esses temas. Essa grande sensibilização mundial para que as pessoas entendam o sentido da Mãe Terra. Nós indígenas para poder manter a nossa identidade, mas o mundo inteiro para garantir a própria vida, né? Estamos hoje né, junto, alinhadas com várias mulheres do mundo que se levantam também protagonizando a luta. Então nós estamos assim querendo contar uma nova história. Então quando a gente diz nós somos a cura da terra, é que nós, povos indígenas, né, não nos separamos. Nós somos o território, né? Nós somos a Mãe Terra, nós somos a água, nós somos a floresta.
Her work absolutely infuses me with, hope and possibility. She's just so matter of fact about the reality that we need to blend these things in together so much more and understand both the pain that has been caused. I mean, that was one of the things that was really, again, I think encouraging during COP28 was an $11 billion fund that was created to understand and to help mitigate some of the greatest impact that will happen to vulnerable communities that have been not the ones who have burned all the carbon, right? Have not had the opportunity to use those to build their economies, but are the ones who are being hit disproportionately around this. And how do we try and transfer some around that? That's going to be, again, take some sophistication to be able to move those funds from here to there. So just we made the pledge. The question will be whether or not, how that actually gets deployed. But I think that this conversation will happen more. And I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to jump in from New Zealand as well and talk about that there's also a first, I think, Maori minister that's in the cabinet now there, right?
Yeah, we have a really big representation for a political party being the Māori Party, and they they have a really strong voice in our parliamentary system, and we have it infiltrated throughout a lot of our kind of government sectors and private sector as well. There's a real reverence to the land, to the way that they view sustainability and protecting our natural resources. So yeah, it's quite striking actually how prevalent that is across the country.
That has been part of, I think, even in your constitution stuff, but is it just recently that there was someone who took office who was one of the first of that community to serve in parliament? I feel like there was some news around that. Did I make that up, Emma?
No, you didn't. There's a young woman who is 21, I think she is, who is taking a seat in the cabinet, and she's from the South Island, Christchurch or Border, somewhere like that. And she kind of fell into it because everybody thought that she had this incredible voice that could represent her tribe. So, yeah, but it's unusual. She is the youngest.
You're right, and it was a change of seat in that region actually as well. So it went from a national, which is our conservative, to a Labour seat, and then also being a woman of Indigenous origin and so young. So yeah, lots of firsts there. So yeah, thank you for reminding me that. Yeah.
But so again, as we were talking about the news story, right, about recognizing that this is the way that we're starting to see progress happen. At the same time, we can talk to in Australia, there was a vote that went against Indigenous people. So it's not like we're saying we're all moving in a straight line from here to there, but it feels really encouraging to be able to see those voices.
That said, Nancy, being in Australia right now for me, I've noticed how people have just taken it on, organizations have taken it on their shoulders to do it anyway. So they're acknowledging the local, regional land. Yeah, it's really amazing how they're just doing it anyway, despite it coming up from a legislative perspective.
And that's, I think, where we end up seeing the strongest uptake, right? Even when we, in the United States, when we talked about electric vehicles and all that, now there's just legislation that just come through to be able to incentivize that more, but it didn't come through specifically through legislation. It became through recognizing that this is just any sort of good business for everyone. There was a great article written several years ago about the green vortex when this started to, consumers were wanting it, and there were business reasons to be doing it, and obviously climate reasons to be doing it. It sort of started feeding itself, and it's been fascinating to see that industry take such a giant shift. You're nodding, Ila. Anything to add?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I just think that it could create its own flywheel around some of this stuff. And then again, when legislation can come in and continue to incentivize it, I think it's great, but I don't think relying on that is the only way to go. So it feels good to know that people are caring. And I think, again, youth, we can say over and over again about what's happening with youth in the United States. Emma and I have been tracking this intrepid group of teenagers and young adults that have been suing the federal government on behalf of their own health and well-being for not having managed their resources well enough to be able to ensure quality of life moving ahead. And it has been through multiple administrations. It has been going through, stopped and started through our court systems for a long time, and it's continuing. Now they're going state by state, and they had a really big win in Montana this past year, and are using that as a template for potentially being able to, again, go across other states. So then we start to get, again, Becky was just saying the same thing, right? It was really encouraging to see what they're up to. And they're like kids ages like 6 to 23. Like, it is a very, very, very young and very thoughtful group that are leading the way in this. So again, it is when I go around and I do my keynote talks, I'll say that, there's lots of different reasons to be doing this, but one reason for sure is to not to be held accountable into the future when people turn to us and say, why didn't you do more? And why didn't you do enough? And whether it's, states that are suing petroleum right now, but again, youth who will be holding us accountable as we move forward. And it's happening in Europe too. Good to know. All right. So speaking of that, okay, so then we go on to the next site and say, where should this money be invested as we move forward, right? We start to think about where it is and how we want to bring climate action and climate justice around the world. What are ways that we can think about this differently? And again, it was exciting to be in Dubai and at the Dubai Futures Forum and hear Angela Wilkinson, who is the Secretary General for the World Energy Council, give a really beautiful opening talk. Like, she really started this whole thing with her vision about how to do this and do it more fairly. Interestingly, when you read more about her background, she really came from a strong foresight place, and she had worked for big petroleum companies, including Royal Dutch Shell, which has done a ton of scenario planning. So it's not like they didn't know that this was all a possibility and where it is that we were headed. But somehow she has channeled it now into really significant climate action. And so we introduce you or remind you this piece of Angela Wilkinson's framing for how we move to a different energy future.
And I'm going to talk about energy in terms of what I think is most important about energy, which is not technology or money, but realistic hope of a better future for humanity. We have to remember, all of us, that every living system evolves through a fundamental transformation of its underlying energy system. And that is as true now today, here at this meeting and in the advent of COP28, as it has been since time immemorial. 3 billion plus people in the world lack sufficient access to affordable energy for better lives and livelihoods. So when we look at the energy situation, we understand we are in a new era of energy transition for people and planet. So when we think about the search for new solutions, it's important to remember that what has worked in the past isn't enough. And what we're focusing on is how do we redesign the whole energy system with others, and we call that the humanizing energy challenge. So energy is a system, and there's increasing diversity in energy systems worldwide. We all talk about there's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no such thing as an easy, quick fix. And we have to remember that energy systems include people. Indeed, the biggest blind spot in all the roadmaps that are available is the role of people and the shifting role of demand and energy uses and how those will evolve. What we at the World Energy Council are doing and how we use the future in this conversation about mobilizing energy transitions at speed and scale. For me, it's not enough to hope for a better future. Realistic hope is always in action. And the challenge we have is how do we mobilize agency now, everywhere in this challenge? Another thing that we're doing is we take the role of empowering women and children very seriously. I have to say, I am not a person who likes to talk about the role of women in energy in terms of just quotas in boardrooms. What we're interested in is how do we enable women in their role as owners, designers, entrepreneurs, users, buyers of energy, not a one-dimensional view of women in energy, but a 360-degree possibility space of the role of women in energy. And let's not forget, not the next future energy leaders generation, but kids in energy. I was challenged recently by somebody who said, surely we shouldn't be engaging children in energy transition conversations. That's our responsibility. But if we don't show the future generation what energy will be in the future, how do they become inspired to think about a career or a life in energy? Multiple energy transition pathways are emerging in all regions. Our challenge is finding ways to lead with and learn from each other, to forge common understanding, recognizing we need flexibility along the way. This isn't just about replacing power generation, it requires new infrastructures, new storage solutions, and we must anticipate much more shifting demand and new uses and users of energy. As we're moving through this energy transition, one of the things we also know is that change has to include collaboration across sectors, silos, and segments of society. The last thing that we do as the World Energy Council is we convene and connect diverse leaders across silos, segments, and sectors of society during World Energy Congress. As we move from the climate-centric COP here in the next 10 days to the energy-centric World Energy Congress, we will be convening in the pioneering port of Rotterdam, and we will be discussing how to redesign energy systems for people and planet, showcase how communities and countries are making progress. We brought in a different agenda. It's humanizing energy. Humanizing energy to make faster, fairer, and more far-reaching energy transitions happen. As the first speaker announced, you can't do that by forecasting the future. You have to do it by co-creating. There's a lot of rhetoric today on collaboration. Collaboration is the key to a better future for all, but we're going to have to dig deep. The collaboration we need for the future is not the collaboration that worked in the past. It's going to be more horizontal. It's going to involve people who aren't like us. That's the future of energy. Thank you very much for having me here.
Again, I was encouraged to see a woman in this leadership position. I think she's probably the first woman who has led this cause, and to speak about it in such human terms. She's got a very, very sophisticated job trying to move all these pieces and parts of the ecosystem together. But the fact that she can speak so clearly and so confidently about not just the humanity, but the role that women and children play in being able to make these agreements. And she said this right before we actually then ended up moving into COP, and I'll just remind us that part of what was created there again was $11 billion loss and damage fund. We had 120 countries committed to triple the amount of renewable energy and double the amount of energy efficiency over the next decade. And more than 140 countries pledged to account for greenhouse gas emissions in the food systems, which was a huge and early win in this whole conversation. And that oil companies made big promises to address methane pollution, which can be even more damaging apparently than carbon dioxide emissions. And by the end had an historic commitment by the parties to transition away, quote unquote, from fossil fuels toward clean energy. And why, again, that didn't make everybody fully happy because they wanted it to be a complete elimination. The fact that it was the first time that it had been written into a COP stockade that there would be a movement away from fossil fuels. So I would say that that was tremendous progress. The question is now, how do we hold people accountable to not just making the pledges, but to actually doing the work? But it feels as though, again, there were 400,000 people that were not officially a part of COP that were there to basically hold accountability for this, right? And to be part of the movement moving forward. So, Ila, what was your sense of it while you were there?
Yeah, first of all, the opening speech at the Future Forum was absolutely incredible. And definitely to see a woman and speak with such powerful messaging was, really amazing. COP. I'm always double-minded on those things. Obviously, a huge progress and a lot of good commitment that we needed. But obviously, those are the kind of people at the decision-making at national government level and all sorts of sub-layers that are the ones that we need to keep addressing and talking to. I think overall, the reason why I'm optimistic is a whole generational shift. And I know you already mentioned this, but the younger people are the most aware of the problem. And I'm one of the millennials. We're also unapologetic and unforgiving, and we want the change now. So as soon as our generation, my generation, is at the power and in decision-making, then I think everything can be even faster, because of course, those are things that have been talked about for like, I don't know how many decades. And they needed to be already agreed upon many decades ago. So I think the reason why now it's such a fundamentally positive moment is this. I was reading recently that millennials are going to be the richest generation in history, and they're just about to inherit this wealth. Because of course you have a few passing, a few whatever. I don't remember the exact lexicon on The Economist. But the moment there is such wealth, with also the right decision making, then going back to the investments and the impact investing and money towards and funds towards innovation and progress, then can really happen, because we're always tied to who's actually deciding to invest, right? And put the money where. So now hopefully that millennials are going to inherit this huge wealth. We can then
and actually, you know, the data is also, it's millennials and it's women, disproportionately women as well.
Correct.
So great.
Exactly.
Sort of force multiplier around that.
Wait, how does, if I could ask, like, why is it that more women will be inheriting more of the wealth?
Partly because women are living longer than men, and women are more single now. So when there are families or whatever, as the boomers are passing on and passing along the wealth, women have a tendency to they will have households and head of households disproportionately than they've had in the past. So it's like a giant number. And as we're already seeing with some huge philanthropists, right, they just invest it differently. Whether they invest it differently, there's lots and lots of funds that are increasing right now to align investment with values. We know many of these people are just growing more, but also philanthropists are just thinking about it really differently. So between millennials and women, I think that it really is a very, very encouraging moment to imagine what is happening there. And then you fit another box, which I would say is moms, right? You see a lot of mothers who are stepping into this and thinking about, you've got a young daughter. How's your daughter? 4?
No, 3.5, almost. 4, yeah.
So when you think about the future for her, because I think you're probably the person with the youngest child on this in this gathering right now, how do you think about her future as you imagine this work?
Yeah, scary, but I need to give her a lot of tools to be able to navigate it all. I think climate change and sustainability on one level, but also the AI progress on a lot of other situations with artificial intelligence. So it's both scary and optimistic. I think the more I can teach her to how to navigate this world, the more she's going to thrive. But yeah, our job as parents, and certainly my own job hasn't finished yet. We have a lot to solve first. At an educational level, I mean, the thing that at the moment, why it's such a critical moment for me at the moment is because you have the two giants. One is the planet and one is the AI conversation that now they're overlapping. And you can separate them as much as you want, but they're actually connected as well. So I'm working a lot with artificial intelligence, talking a lot about artificial intelligence, but the things that AI needs are the same things that the climate conversation needs, which is also more women involved, more values, awareness of the bigger picture. Like AI can solve actually a lot of the things we need to solve for the climate conversation, and helping us understand how to build a circular economy in a proper way. On the other end, it's incredibly energy intensive and requires huge amounts of resources, huge amounts of water, and so on and so forth. So the two are interconnected, and now we have them both going at fast speeds.
I gave a talk to a utility group of utility executives from around the world. I mean, from around the country, sorry, last week. And we're having this conversation, right? There's just been a big, huge gathering in Houston, which, by the way, is one of the #1 climate investment or climate tech investment markets in the country, which is interesting. Huge oil and gas, and now also the epicenter of climate innovation. But as they all gathered there was again the tension, right, between the people who are seeing this giant need for energy as we're using more and more, digital technologies, and others who are figuring, and so they're advocating for more coal power plants. Now, the only way we're going to be able to keep up with energy demand that has been relatively flat and now suddenly is like hockey sticking again, is by building more traditional fossil fuel energy sources. And then across the bridge, apparently there are all the folks that were looking for more innovative ways to do it. But what's actually really interesting is the software itself could become much more efficient. We have really, really bloated millions and millions of lines of code that aren't doing anything, that have to flow through these systems that need energy and they need cooling. And so we keep building these more elaborate, ways to navigate and manage that without actually looking at what we're actually putting through that system and recognizing those. So that's why I go back to AI as potentially being part of the solution to go in and really compress all of this and try and make it so that it is not such a big, huge bloated thing. Or you start to imagine, a future in my post-blockchain world with my friends who are thinking about peer-to-peer internet that won't be going through centralized servers and be doing it again in this really very energy intensive way, or even like blockchain in this very intensive way. So I think that there will be this races on, right, between the tools that we have right now and the infrastructure we have versus the ways that we're going to be able to do that more effectively and more efficiently as we move ahead. Becky, did you, I don't know if you're in a position now to jump in and talk about what you think is happening at cities pushing back on allowing, when you say large scale developments, you mean data centers or?
Yeah, so the signal that I'm talking about in particular is related to the Microsoft Center in, I think, Iowa, where they had taken so much of the water resources that the city's no longer allowing expansion of that center or growth of new centers.
Yeah, I read an article about that. They're draining the entire region, aren't they?
Yeah, the people that live around there no longer have access to the water that they actually need because it's cooling the data center.
Yeah.
I was again at an event this summer with some folks from OpenAI, and I think I may have mentioned on another call, but we were having this conversation. They wanted to be able to go to SAM with a sort of ethics agenda, like what are the things that need to be on the list. And they had literally, it was just this room of 25 people, very, very casual. Somebody with a flip chart had written, handwritten the 8 or 9 things that we need to worry about around identity and sovereignty and all the things we want. And I said sustainability, and they're like, oh, right. And then you put it on the flip chart. And you're like, it can't just be like, oh, but yeah, by the way, like it really has to be thought through. And these, as we're bringing, and I also saw a headline, right? They might be the first $1 trillion organization. So the hope is that we get more thoughtful and that we get more people who care about this stuff in charge. So with that, Ila, I will say that part of your work and what drew me so much to you, now, obviously you are married to and connected and building with Ross Lovegrove, who has his own, oh my God, just butchered your husband's name. Sorry. His industrial design work and how well known it is. But I was really drawn as I was getting to know you and in your Instagram and how you were painting the picture of what the future could look like. You gave us a place to navigate to, right? What is it like? We can talk all about what is broken, try and fix it, but I think it always helps when you have a chance to expand your imagination about what that could look like. So do you want to take us through your work for a few minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Okay, great. So yeah, a lot of the things already mentioned. For us, nature is a huge source of inspiration, of course, but overall the practice and this mind shift that needs to happen across sectors, and particularly for us, the creative and the designing of the built environment, is how to design for nature rather than just using nature and take resources away. How can we design for her or hit so that it can just continue to thrive and build upon, which is something that a few subjects talked about over the years. Ross in particular has always been inspired by nature and has been one of the pioneer fathers of biomimicry or design inspired by nature overall. Nature at the moment is still the most intelligent system that we know. And of course, in terms of complexity and intricacy of all the ecosystem, but how every single player within those systems collaborate and cooperate. So going back to the energy opening speech, this collaboration that needs to be horizontal, not only vertical, it's what nature already kind of naturally does. And it's incredibly resourceful. So how to tackle this kind of mindset and approach to designing the environment and everything we touch, it's one of the underlying principles of everything we do. We call it vital design thinking. There are different ways of calling it. There's another movement called life-centered design. But again, it's this idea of designing for nature and with nature in order to just keep on incentivize its own existence parallel with our existence and not just detaching from it. So those are kind of visuals. I'm going to show a mix of actual built and more speculative work, some very artistic and some more tangible. But the entire idea is to redesign cities and smart cities where technology is part of it, more like ecosystems. So we know that the Earth is one giant multitude of ecosystems where not only animals collaborate with the vegetation, but also the whole thermal climate infrastructure in between. It's helping its own existence. Like we know, for example, now that the Sahara Desert, through the winds of the earth, transports all sorts of micronutrients to the Amazonian forest, and therefore the Amazonian forest is so rich and diverse. So if we start playing in one region, the other may get affected, and so on and so forth. So the same way, everything about smart cities and the built environment, so the way we use materials and think about nutrition and think about the inhabitants and energy in between. So what you see here is just visual, trying to start a conversation upon how do we build food, for example, more localized, with vertical farming, which is totally possible through technology, and hydroponics and aquaponics have already been showing to use much less water, for example. We know of vegetation that do not even need that much soil. So you can definitely start to embed all sorts of this kind of mentality within the architectural and the building environment, and therefore being more localized and part of particular zoning in a city. So this is just an overview of all of the things that we're touching. But I think someone else mentioned it at the very beginning of this conversation, how AI is pushing the progress on material innovation, for example, and material science. That's one of the things that we're touching upon, for example, specifically for architecture. And then how to make the entire conversation very exciting in terms of communication, education, and artistic expression. For us, what we experience most of the time is when the population is completely detached. And it is a privilege to think about sustainability. I mean, this is what the shocking reality still is, it's the 1% causing the whole problem, right? And it's the 1% that has the luxury to think about it. So it's like so contradictory. The average person that is struggling cannot just stop their existence to think about, oh, let me solve the sustainability problem. So it's still looking at this 1% kind of cities environment, but hopefully that kind of mind shift then affect every kind of chain down the line of how decisions are made and are more conscious. We believe that if you see something therefore you're reminded, but also you love, you generate this affection towards the something. And at the moment, our cities are way too mechanical. They're not embedding nature that well. Certainly, you have those parks, but parks don't cut it in terms of how you broaden up the conversation about living with nature and sustaining nature. We know of a lot of species that are that we already extinct, and some in the progress of being extinct. And you only have charitable funds trying to tackle the problem, but we always say, oh, the elephant is there, I don't see the elephants, therefore you're not reminded. So the same way, we need to just have a different approach of how we look at nature and living systems. Those are examples of how, again, you can grow your localized food and have that kind of, again, agriculture is one of the big factors, but as long as agriculture is so far away from you on a daily basis, you're not reminded of how much it takes. And it's gardening. Anybody that knows how hard work gardening is, because you have a garden, that explains, you kind of realize that actually it's such a difficult job, right? This is where technology can actually help us make everything more close to us, make it easier to understand how to work in favor of nature, grow nature, and live with nature in a more seamless way. So anything from localized food and in-house experience to art expressions, and therefore having an effect on health as well. So this is one just a little subject that has such a powerful way, but we all know that plants generate oxygen. Yet we don't seem to be using plants that much in just tackling the pollution conversation in cities. So there's been a huge conversation about health in cities, how pollution is affecting breathability in most developed countries. London has a huge pollution problem. Dubai has a huge, if not double the problem. Developing countries have enormous problems as well. I was reading recently that Milan in Italy and the whole of the Lombardia region where I'm from has the worst pollution, the second worst pollution in Europe as well. But nobody talks about it. Nobody knows how to solve it. Well, we know that plants naturally sucks CO2 and generate oxygen. Why are we not building cities to have just more plants? Simple things. Sometimes the answer can be very simple. It just needs to be constructed and implemented at a policy level, at architectural design level. We travel often to China, and China has always been criticized for having unbreathable air, although in the last few years, since after COVID, their cities are as green as they can be. It's beautiful. We've been to Shanghai last year, and I just visited Shenzhen, which of course is naturally having more greenery. But Shanghai particularly was shocking for me to see the progress that they've done, not only at a transportation level, where the government just said you need to have electric vehicles, and therefore everybody switched. I've seen more Teslas in Shenzhen and Shanghai than I've seen anywhere else in Europe and even US. It is shocking. And now you have all sorts of ecosystem rebuilding. You have butterflies in Shanghai that a few years back you could not even see a bird. It's crazy how nature just comes back relatively fast. So it's just about taking those actions, and they're planting greenery everywhere. Another factor that we can consider is, for example, green roofing upon building. And we have a lot of buildings that can be renovated incorporating green roofing. We know green roofing can be great for the living ecosystems, but also have huge insulation properties. So why we're not just covering the entire fabric of our cities with green roofing? Big question mark. So all of this work is relooking at how we build interactive spaces, cultural spaces, but also, as I mentioned, transportation, electric vehicles and cars is a huge subject that we touch upon, and how those electric vehicles can be recharged across the city. So on one level, you have the conversation about electric vehicle, yet we don't have infrastructure built to sustain those electric vehicles across cities. We lack EV charging stations. And all sorts of things. So we try to cover it all so that when we propose a project, it's easily deployable. And those are just imagery that shows how can we end up down the line the more we integrate technology and AI and the whole of computing that needs to be done from an energy perspective, all down to materials, how nature can grow within what we build as well. Those are on the left is what you see is a solar street light. It's called the solar tree. So this is has been built and has been already deployed in a few cities. I think it's already 10 years old. But when Ross first designed this solar street light, of course, it was inspired by nature. But and the whole principle of vital design thinking is also how to design mimicking nature so that it can visually communicate a natural ecosystem. So this is not a living object, right? But it communicates life in itself, and it uses solar energy. And this is just one of the examples that you can design something great, but then you have all sorts of constraints within the economy that just don't grow as fast as you grow. So this is a 10 years old project. I think at the moment it was launched, we have several cities around the world being interested in it. But from a purely economic point of view, the object is relatively pricey compared to a normal street light. So you hit all those bump roads across the line where it might not be economically viable for most people. So how do you make it, how do you reduce costs? How can you use different materials? Now, solar panels are incredibly cheap. I think they're like one of the most cheap means of generating energy that we can access these days. I have a friend that has done just very flexible fabrics that you can kind of attach to any building or balcony to generate energy. So, you know, this was very costly 10 years ago. Now it's much more cheap. So the moment more people develop the technology, the more the costs get amortized and lower, so that it's mutually beneficial.
Pete, I don't know. So our buddy Pete is amazing too, and it'd be great to hear from him and from Nico, which we'll also hear at the end. But I don't know that art is always about being economically viable. I think great design sometimes, right? It's about scale. These are all new, and we've got these other infrastructures that have been built to maximize like how many ways we, you know, deploy this stuff. So I wonder if at some point, right, the money that it saves in energy cost, and that you start to build them at scale, the cost starts to become more balanced over time, or we start to look at the cost all the way around, not just in the building and deploying, but also in the managing and running. So
100%. And you need all sorts of sensors, and you need all sorts of the technology being able to prove that, right? Like, for example, now we're working with several startups that they monitor the energy efficiency of the hospitality sector. If you look at the hospitality sector, which is one example that lives in cities or elsewhere, they are absolutely clueless about how much energy they consume and how much they need to pay for their consumption, and also how to even start looking at the efficiency. They don't know what's the thermal condition of their hair. Therefore, if you don't know how much cooling and heating you're having in your internal indoor hair, you don't know how much you actually need to provide to optimize the whole system. And the building envelope is really, really part of the whole conversation. We're trying to do a few renovations here in Dubai because, of course, they have a huge heat problem. So the more you insulate the buildings here, the more you are energy efficient. Therefore, you need less cooling, as in AC and so on and so forth. But you still have the conversation about ROE, and ROE, return on investment, is such a myopic subject most of the time. They want the ROE today when they don't understand that in 5 years or 2 years' time, you're already having a huge ROE because you're saving so much. So it's part of the mind shift is also being able to have this long-term vision, which most of the people in charge don't have. And I think it's partly cultural. Like when I speak with, or when I encounter people from the Asian countries, they seem to have that more embedded within their thinking. I think it's an Asian cultural thing. They think long term. They don't think of today.
And
So
more
when they,
systemically,
so I think culture has a lot to do with it. Those are other examples. On the left, it's a glass pavilion that is, of course, inspired by nature, but it uses also less energy to produce the glass. So the way we decided to, Ross decided to showcase this glass facade system was having nature as part of the conversation of how to display it. Because of course it's liquid and inspired by water. But so I think communication overall is one of the biggest subject we have. How do you communicate sustainability and make it endure? So when you design a product that is inspired by nature, it also kind of like self-narrates the story of what's behind. And all the way down to fashion and again, architecture. For us, the whole of what we produce is interconnected, and it's an opportunity to deliver a story. So how we look at fabrics also relates. How do we look at buildings, and we construct systems that are more efficient from a design point of view, material point of view, energy point of view. Yes.
What is the picture on the right?
So the picture on the right is highly speculative, but
You're
it's
not growing
again,
a baby.
It's growing a baby instead of having just a normal mobile. Why don't we build living mobiles that can also regenerate the air that the baby breathes? So this is just a very speculative, futuristic mobile that it's an entirely bioengineered living mobile.
That's so
basically.
cool. I love that. Oh my God, that is so gorgeous. Thank you so much for just showing us like the possibility of all this. And I don't know which one of those things were speculative and which ones of those were ones that you guys have already built or ones that you're in the conversation about doing. But I love that you're getting invited into this work and into this conversation in places more where people are looking and asking for this kind of way of thinking about things. So we can ask more questions of you, but here's what I was thinking about doing. I think I'm gonna do an audible here. Pete, if you're up for it. Instead of playing Kate Rayworth's video, which we can just send you the link to go to the TED Talk. It's an amazing talk, and I'll explain why. Would you, in a moment, after we do a bit of music, want to talk about Kwasala and the work that you're doing? Are you in a position?
Sure, I'll give it a go.
Okay, cool. You have like a minute and a half to prepare because we're going to play a pretty beautiful music video that takes the work that Ila just showed us and just kind of gives us a moment to reflect on it while we listen to Yo-Yo Ma. They describe it as a requiem for a glacier in Alaska that at this point was much smaller than it had been in the past. And so there was, again, and I had an opportunity recently to watch Yo-Yo Ma live when he came to Austin, and he feels so strongly about using his work and his craft right now to raise attention again and awareness around it. And I thought this was such a hopeful and beautiful piece of music. So hopefully we'll hear a lot of that in the next month. And so feel free to share it when everyone's looking for something that could give us some hope around this conversation. And with that, I will turn it over then to Pete. So Pete Corke is a good friend of our Play Big Inc. family and a collaborator on many projects with us, but he has turned his attention now to solving this in a very pragmatic way. So Pete, you only have about 5 minutes to give us a little overview, but I would love for people to hear about what you're doing with Sentry and Kwasala, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Nancy. 5 minutes is longer than I thought. I think you said a minute and a half before the music video.
I'll give you, I said give a minute and a half to prepare to do.
Okay, great. Well, I haven't given up on nature, and I certainly haven't given up on humanity. So Kwasala, okay, how do I sum this up in 5 minutes? We're an indigenous-led and indigenous majority-owned initiative, and we're creating a way for anybody to hold an investment value in protected nature. So we're doing it in a very unique way. We're in a very non-colonial way, in a very non-traditional capitalist way. So we are turning the right to extract into the right to protect, steward, and regenerate. And we're doing that in deep partnership with indigenous communities on the ground, as Nancy said, in a very practical way. And we're using the very tools of the extractive financial system, and we're reversing the polarity on them. So if you think about what a logging license is, the license to extract from a forest, it's a relationship between humanity and that ecosystem. And it says, hey, we're going to kill you. And we're going to kill you a little bit every year. That's what a logging license is, the right to extract. And these rights to extract occupy our economic financial system as they are right now all over the world. And what we're doing is we've said, hey, what if we buy that relationship? What if we invest in that relationship to extract? And we say, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to change that relationship between humanity and the ecosystem. We're going to reverse the polarity on it. And so what we're doing is we are buying the right to extract. Then we're working with the indigenous land title holders who actually own the right to steward those lands underneath the logging licenses. And we're converting those logging licenses into the right to protect, steward, and regenerate. And by doing that, we're creating a regenerative economic model in which anybody can then invest in the asset side of that. So if you think about it, what you're doing is you're investing in the supply side of carbon credits, eco credits. And that's a long-term partnership with indigenous communities that's changing the paradigm between humanity and these ecosystems and allowing an economic model for their regeneration and their stewardship and their protection over a long-term basis. And our pilot project that we are creating in British Columbia, we've very literally had to change the law to create what we're able to do now in British Columbia, which is to purchase the right to extract, but not to extract. And that is a big paradigm shift in British Columbia, which is why we've been a very stealth organization for the last 2 years, because guess what? The government, one, doesn't want you to buy the right to extract and not to extract, because that's how they make all their tax revenues. But also they don't like to have you selling or telling the world that you're going to do something new and that's changing their system. So we're just about to come into light now after 2.5 years of stealth. And that's because we've been able to push forward a legislative change that allows us to create the right to protect, steward, and regenerate. And we're hoping that that is something that will be hopefully recognized all over the world as something of value that we can not only create, but we can invest in, and that can empower us all as, you know, frankly, I come at this as somebody who 2.5 years ago felt completely incapable of creating any kind of economic investment in a living forest. Well, that's what we have tried to create. We've created a mechanism by which you can invest in a living forest in deep partnership with indigenous communities that have for thousands of years looked after these forests, and we can then for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations in the future invest in their future protection, stewardship, and regeneration. How was that for a nutshell?
Beautifully done. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. And Nico, I think you're familiar with this work too, because you had Pete's partner there with you in Costa Rica recently. But I think it's just encouraging for us to know. Roshi, you got a question?
I just have a clarifying question. It was something you said earlier, Pete, that I just missed the last part of. What you said, basically this model is you're investing in the supply side of, and then I missed the rest of it. So I was wondering if you could restate that.
Sure. So if you think about it, carbon credits and eco credits are all exciting mechanisms for the economic paradigm to invest in eco services, but there's very few mechanisms for most of us to be able to invest on the supply side of that paradigm. So, you know, a lot of the eco credit, carbon credit space is being created by the buyers, being created by those who are emitting, and therefore needing to purchase the offsets to those carbon creation, you know, the carbon emissions. And so what we're doing is creating a mechanism for anybody to invest in the supply side of that market. And so that's quite exciting, because markets are driven upwards in value when you have third parties who are able to partake in those markets in a way that push up the value, push up the price of the carbon. And so that's why we're quite excited about it.
Part of it, again, is that Pete has seen it. If you look on the horizon, right, again, you go back to COP28 or any of these other places where governments are making these big, huge declarations or claims or pledges, right? And they push it back down then onto the companies to be able to try and like make that real. And so Pete also sees that it's just a great investment vehicle and you were recently at Oxford, and they were very excited about what you're doing because you'd really thought through the entire investment stack side of this. So we could have a whole conversation on, investment and climate investment and how you build these kinds of very thoughtful solutions that, again, include the Indigenous landholder to begin with. But I just thought it was good for people to see and hear that there's work really in progress right now, and that it becomes hopefully not just a template, but a place for this conversation can grow with other people who are looking at parts of this, but haven't put it together in the full stack. So thank you for extemporaneously jumping in. Again, the whole purpose of this, news story is that we're not trying to cover the entire issue. What we're trying to find are the new solutions, the new ways of framing things, the new conversation about it, and paradigm shifting and hopefully soul shifting. So as part of that, I had this extraordinary opportunity to go to Costa Rica and meet Nico and his wife and his land and what he is building and doing there. And we can talk more about that in a minute, but I think what was among the many profound moments that we had together there, Nico, and it's funny to see you in a sweater, man, because you're usually like in no shirt or like in a Hawaiian shirt. So I'm having like my own like moment right now where I've never seen Nico in like wool. But we were at a moment near or really close to the Diamante waterfall, which is this extraordinary waterfall in the cloud forest, and watching the sunset. And as we all sat there in silence, just taking in this moment of reverence right near a labyrinth and this beautiful plateau, all of a sudden you just pulled out this piece that you had written and you shared it with us there. So I had asked you to come and share this with us here to take us out of our heads and out of our pocketbooks and right back into our heart and into our soul around this work. So thank you.
Thanks for letting me share. Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
If you want to give any context to this, you're welcome. If you want to just launch, the floor is yours.
Beautiful.
And then follow directly with that with Daniel from People of Peace, who will be performing, or I guess we'll end up playing a video of Daniel's music right after yours, so we can sort of linger into this space for a few minutes before we chat.
Amazing. Well, I can't say I couldn't find a more aligned group. I have a background in controlled environment agriculture, and so seeing biophilic design in certain ways as it pertains to those pieces has been a dream, of smart cities all the way to new ways of finding stores of value, and, getting away from securitizing and commodifying more of nature to just be extracted upon and abused by speculative wealth gains. And so just like seeing the breadth and depth of even the questions that are asked, it's just a real treat. Thank you, Nancy, for the invitation. Water Woman is the name of this poem. And I believe matrilineal succession of title and contracts is one of the keys to world peace. And, I live and breathe it with my new daughter now in my life. And, but for a long time, I would always speak about my yet to be born daughter. So I'll see if I can keep it together. Thanks for letting me share.
And feel free to guys close your eyes and just like imagine you're sitting in this incredible spot as Nico, from his own very poignant view, invites us into a different way of thinking.
Too long, we've neglected the waters and the women of this world. Old songs we've collected by our daughters, flowers yet unfurled. New prayers we've course corrected, directives for deep remembrance, intentions not forced but respected, respective of more reaped deliverance. We're all at the mercy and fates of our ignorance and our mistakes, inheriting the shame, wearing the blame, preaching something different while it's all still the same. The oppression, the bigotry, the repression, the idolatry, transition to solidarity. We are the waters, as what is in you is what makes them and me. We are the rains, for as it falls, kisses the earth, the sown seed. It feeds the mountains by crystalline mandalas that melt to the sea. It fills the holy aquifers that replenish each and every living being. The lands have been in the hands of man since before time was measured in sand. Bought and sold, fought for, stole, extracted and used, taxed and abused. Would a mother have sold our future down the drain for profit and quick gain? Would she have depleted our water, soil, and quality of air? Could she have retreated and sought for peace or fought fair? Death, debt, and destruction is not what any mother would choose. Instead, men have been playing a game with all life that we all lose. The time is now. We build upon new principles, values, and design for wealth. All pines for hearts filled, a new dawn, sensible. We choose happiness and health. We're marching forth together, our mission clear and strong, to assume accountability and admit when we are wrong. We stand for the waters, the bringer of life to all that lives. Home for many, Mother Earth remembers, and she also forgives.
Take it as it goes right now. We can be right whenever. Every little part of you is done. Should I be right forever? Can it be lost in the light over sound? Will it be high no matter? Just take it as it goes right now. Can be lost whenever. Take it as it goes right now. We can be wrong wherever. Every little part is coming around, making it walk together. How will we come in the tide? Fate become in the nightfall. Just take it as it goes right now. 'Cause it can be right with whoever. How will we come in the tide? Goes on and on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on. It goes on and on and on.
Sorry, there was a siren that was going by before. I was saying at the end of our last gathering in March, we got weepy in sort of acknowledgement and love for one another. And I get weepy when I hear that essay again, or poem or prayer, I don't know, or forgiveness, an apology, exactly how you frame it, Nico. But to hear a man hold the space and take responsibility for the damage that has been done to the earth, and the recognition that a woman would not have done that, or a mother would not have done that to her earth, is really, really, really poignant and powerful, and feels like something really important is acknowledged and seen when you shared that. And we talked about, whether I or Emma or somebody else should read it, and it really needed to come from you and from a man in holding that space. So thank you for acknowledging and taking that with and for us. I don't know if others reactive, but Daniel, we had a chance to meet at South by. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to hear you play this song live because of technical difficulties, but it just felt like the right accompaniment. I don't know if you want to jump in and share.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say everything everybody said is pretty much exactly the intention for specifically that song, but also in parts this project, People of Peace, which is think, Peter, I think you wrote art is not economically viable on the chat. And I just looked at it and it kind of caught my eye. That's the beautiful thing about it. It doesn't need, because we're not looking for the people who are run by money and power to change the earth and for the better, obviously. And so my outlet through music, basically, which is something obviously I love and I hold dear to my heart. But that's just an outlet for me to try and inspire kindness and gratitude and love towards one another, and eventually towards becoming better and improving the world, slowly at a time. And specifically that song, inner title, which the word means a place in the seashore where is covered in high tide and uncovered in low tide. It's basically like a metaphor on like a perfect balance, which my reasoning behind it is trying to find the perfect balance within us and within the world, for us basically to be in a place where we can unselfishly give back to whoever else and not think about our profit. And like Ila said about the ecosystem and everything running through the Amazon, through the Sahara and Ethiopia and all those places, it's all in one specific, it's one certain balance. It's if, obviously we're talking about oil and all that, and if that keeps going, obviously something else will take its place. And so there's got to be a certain balance in everything. And I think through art, even though it's not economically viable per se, you can change maybe you can try and inspire and maybe change slowly minds of people, most people who are, like Ila said as well, who are not thinking about bigger things than their own lives, basically, for the most part. And so that's my aim, to try and, inspire the small person or the everyday person to maybe make a change. So it's a small change, which will kind of carry away, like a butterfly effect in a sense, which might take time. But we cannot rely only on the 1%. That's what I think. And so it can be as small as, not killing a fly in your way, maybe just capturing it and sending it out outside. It can be as small as planting a tree or not tearing down the tree. And so everything you said, especially, Nico, I heard about the poem and I was waiting to hear it, and I agree completely. And I think definitely we have to kind of give whatever we can to try and, help the other, which can be other person, which can be other communities. And eventually, I do believe, I'm very, very optimistic about this. I know there's, it's hard to be optimistic when you hear a lot of what's going wrong in the world, but I think inherently people are good, and eventually it will catch up.
I agree. And I think that that's the whole point of it. And I think all of these contributions, right? The art, the finance, the engineering, the design, the technology, the storytelling, the political pieces of it, the consulting pieces of it, like we're all in there doing our bit. And I think that maybe down the line, we'll have a session around, measurement and economic modeling, because I think that we've got the wrong language for being able to measure this and the wrong approach to being able to measure it. So I think that's part of the big shift that's going to happen, is that we're going to look at this from like a different, we're going to, I do not even quantify it, but we're going to acknowledge it in really different ways as we move forward, which is part of the work that I get excited about, and hopefully get a chance to dive in more and with Nico. And I will say, and even the tiniest, when we talk about micro actions, when you go to email Daniel, his email address is we@People of Peace. So he doesn't take any, opportunity to not connect you to the bigger mission in any way, shape, or form. So thank you, Daniel, again, for being part of our event at South by, and for being part of our event tonight, and for being in the world doing what you do. And Nico, for taking your head and your heart and mashing them together in such an extraordinary way, or weaving them, I should say less violently, weaving them together in such an extraordinary way. And Ila, for your work with Ross, to help us envision and imagine what the world could look like, and Pete, for what you're doing to help us figure out how to put, our money and our action into greater alignment, and be able to see, invest in the life of something, not in the death of something, is really where it is that we're headed. So with that, we're sort of I always am respectful of time, and the fact that I'm always grateful that you guys do this with us in the evening here in the US. I think the sun's starting to come up in Dubai. But any other closing thoughts or comments, other than I'm just super grateful for you all. That's it. Anybody else? Nico.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, everyone. It's been absolutely wonderful to gather and hear so many different players and voices and opinions and emotions being shared. Love the music, love the flow of everything. So just thank you. It's been wonderful. And I'm actually surprisingly not tired at all, just more inspired. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for your beautiful work. And again, thank you for saying yes when we said, would you come and hang out with us at this moment in time? And next month we'll do it again on May 1st. We'll be back. The focus on that will be around actually the state of mother and children, right? As we think about Mother's Day, we think about each month, what's happening. And May, it'll be around mothers and Mother's Day. And so there's a whole conversation we can have right now about what the state is of being a child in the world right now. So we were going to focus it through the lens, actually, through the vision of the child. And as you know, Ila had the youngest child on the call until you jumped in.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a little note, because the poem, it's called Water Woman, and we named our girl Ocean 3 years ago. So everything is like connecting. So yeah, thank you again.
Oh, that's so great. And there's a bigger project that Nico and his wife and others have invited me into, called the Water Women in Costa Rica, that we'll be sharing more about in time. But I do think that is where the magic is. So anyway, big love, big heart, big hugs to all of you. Again, we do this, because it makes us feel better too. So thank you, Emma and Mita, for putting all this work in together with this each time. And Jennifer and Karen, thank you for loyally being with us. And Becky, I think you had to is still here. And Rebecca, we're so grateful that you're here. And I just feel, lucky to be on the planet with y'all. So as we hear some of this news this month, just know there's another version to the story.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.